Schuster family, Larissa and Timothy Schuster. Now, Larissa and Timothy both grew up on farms and worked very hard doing their chores and tending to their studies because they both wanted to get out of that blue collar, work hard all your life for very little kind of, culture. Even though they lived just an hour away from each other in childhood, they did not meet until college. So, Timothy wanted to be a nurse, and Larissa wanted to be in biology. She loved biology. She was extremely driven. She would do her chores, come home, and study for hours, as would Timothy. So they could, not quite as ambitious as Larissa, but still ambitious. And they both end up going to, so they both came up from great families. They both end up going to University of Missouri, I'm pretty sure. The University of Missouri and Columbia. Correct. So, this is where they met, where she met her future husband, and he met his future killer, unfortunately. But it was a love at first sight, and it was also the age of, 1960 to 1970 is when the feminist movement started, and more women were entering the workplace and wanting careers from themselves. They didn't want to just stay home and have babies. This did a couple things. This really hurt the man's position in a house, and it also affected who took care of the children, right? So these two finished their degree. Larissa finishes in biology. She becomes a lab rat, basically. And Timothy wants to go to nursing school, which he did. And eventually gets hired as a nurse. And then one day they were dating and got married in 1982. In 1989, Larissa was offered a job in Fresno, California, at a huge lab. Now, Timothy didn't really want to leave his family. They had a daughter, Kristen, at this point, who is only a few years old, and, he was like, well, I don't know if I want to leave my parents. Do you want to leave your parents? And the thing is, whatever Larissa wanted, Larissa got. Just remember that. There is no excuse for there's no room for anybody else to have anything, because Larissa's gonna get everything she wants. So, after moving to Fresno, California, so they get up and they move their little family to Fresno, California in 1989. Now, Larissa is up over the moon, and they have a little girl, and everything seems to be great. They move into a nice neighborhood, a nice house, and Timothy also gets a job as a hospital administrator, so he's doing really well too. However, she is like a science guru of the year. I mean, she makes a lot of money, more money than he does by far, and it's not that she was smarter or better than Timothy. She just had a more lucrative job. Laboratories make a lot of money. They do, and a director makes a good part of that. So, Larissa, great, loves her job, is at the lab all the time in Fresno. And they decide in 1990 to have another child, which is a son, Tyler. So Tyler comes around in 1990. And this is kind of when kids, right? But Larissa's like, it's not gonna be me. If you want to do it, you can do it, but I'm not doing it. And remember what I said? What Larissa wants, Larissa gets. What happens to this fantastic couple, this power couple that wanted to get away from that farming, blue-collar lifestyle and go into the executive, high-end, live in Fresno, California lifestyle, I guess. Well, the marriage starts to fall apart, and here's why. Because Larissa, even though he has a great job, and let's face it, hospital administrators, that's a great job, right? It is not his fault that his wife makes more money than he does. I mean, it's a very lucrative position, being in charge of a lab. It really is. So she just starts to berate him in front of the children and say, oh, you don't make as much money as I do. You don't know how to support this family. You are impotent. You're sexually inadequate. What does that have to do with anything? The man's probably sexually inadequate because of this domineering woman he's with. That I was sexually inadequate and ugly and didn't bring that bacon home like I should. I'll tell you what, that would really, I would have actually left her. But Tim didn't. Tim hung out with his friends. He developed a life. He took the kids to school. He made their lunch. He made dinner. He cooked. He cleaned. He did everything. She worked all the time. All she did was stay in her cubby, basically. So, this is obviously not going to be good, right? This, doesn't sound healthy. This does not sound healthy at all. Well, Timothy puts up with it because he loves his kids. He loves them to death. He really does. And the thing is, I'm just gonna bring this down to there. The thing is that, what do you do in that situation? I'm trying to get these closer. You can tell. Treat your wife like she doesn't exist and just exist. No, you're gonna have to. Every night she's coming home and she's screaming at him. You're this, you're that, you don't bring home enough money. Well, how much money do you need? You're gonna have to hire a babysitter. You're gonna have to have somebody to, pick up your kids, to take them to, soccer practice, to baseball, to, volley practice, to saxophone lessons. Whatever your children are doing, you have to be there. A lot of people don't understand that it's not that easy, that children are not cheap, and with that comes, responsibility, and this woman did not want to give it. She did not want to give her children the kind of time that they really needed. And Timothy, poor Timothy, I really feel bad for this guy. He's like, look, I'm willing to put up with your bullshit as long as, you stay my wife, basically. So all he wanted was a family unit. He was very close with his parents. He grew up in a very, very nice home. But what do you think happens in a family? What happens to somebody when they're, a child, when their parents are fighting all the time? They're going to try to pull the attention away from all of the chaos and put it on them, so they start rebelling. It's very common. The reason kids do this is because they want that fighting to stop. They want the attention of their parents, so their parents will stop yelling at each other, believe it or not. When a child is in a chaotic household constantly, they feel like, one, it's their fault, and two, that, hey, if I rebel and drink and sneak out of the house and make off together, so maybe things will work out. They don't realize that they're doing this, but that's why, psychologically kids start to do this. In many ways, I mean, there's 100 other ways that kids rebel. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that some of the ways that kids will act out in a situation like this is by, rebelling. So she starts drinking, she starts sneaking out, she starts dating people that their parents don't want her to date. And instead of her mother actually disciplining her, she sends her, and this is crazy to me, she sends her daughter's dealing with the situation, she sends her daughter off to her parents to live for good. Now, her parents have got to be in their 60s at least, or 70s, and here they have this teenage child who, and I don't read where this kid was a problem after that. Apparently she respected her grandparents, and that was that. I don't know, just thinking about that, that should have been very telling to Timothy about how she felt about family. I know it would have been for me that my wife, and apparently Timothy did not have a say at this, because she just shipped him off to her parents' house, by the way, and said, deal with her, I can't. The woman was at work all the time. What are you dealing with, lady? I don't know. So she sends her off, and that's really the last I read where she's a problem. Now they still have Tyler. Remember, Tyler's still young. She was born in 85, and he was born in 9, so that's 5 years difference. If she was like 13 or 14, he was still, only, 9, about 9, 8 or 9. So he's still in the controllable. Plus, I think a girl needs her mother more, and without the mother being around, without Larissa being around all the time, I think really affected her too. I mean, it says she worked all the time. She was at the lab. Like I said, she was basically a lab rat. Probably had more of an effect on Kristen than it did Tyler. Now, Tyler could feel this, like, he didn't have a sister, and he could feel the tension building as well. And it was interesting, I think Timothy probably started to feel a little, I would start to feel a little used by this woman, but he didn't care. He just wanted his family to be together. She would react to it like she was gonna rebel, but then Tyler, on the other hand, he might be like, well, like maybe more like his father. I'm not dealing with her. I don't want to deal with her. Like, save me. Anyway, just saying. That would probably mean I'd be scared. Anyway, this is when everything came to a head, right? So, if you think about it, they got married in 80. What did I say? 82. Yeah, they got married in 82. 92, 2000. They've been married almost 20 years. So, here's 20 years, okay? And you've laid next to them, with them, you have trusted them, you had children with them, you've had all this time with them, right? You would never in a million years think that somebody had it out for you. But, like I said, Larissa gets what Larissa wants, and she did. So how did this all come to play? Because, let me tell you something. then she may have had high IQ. She may have been a brilliant lab rat. She was not a criminal mastermind by any means. Not even a little bit. No, not even a little bit. Sorry. She wasn't. And just because you're smart does not make you smart at everything. I don't think she was a smart parent. I don't think she was a smart wife. I think basically the only thing she could do right was be in a lab and make a lot of money. That's the one thing she could do. And Timothy knew that too. So in the early 2000s, she wanted divorce. Based upon nothing. She wanted to hurt him. She did whatever she could to hurt him. Anything. I mean, constantly berating his sexual capabilities is, that's sad to me. So, instead of being angry, you know what this guy did, who is this awesome husband, and this is really sad, because he was such a great human being. He must have been raised by terrific parents, because instead of getting angry, he was like, you know what, I'm gonna work on this, honey. I'm gonna try to make you happy. I'm gonna work on my advances to you. I'm gonna work on being more sexy, more sexual, and he did. He worked on all of that for her. He loved her. He loved his kids. That tells you how much this man loved this woman. Makes me almost insane because of how many people out there treat their spouses horribly. They have horrible relationships, and he was like, you know what, you're right, I'm gonna make it work. I'm gonna work on my sexuality. I'm gonna work on making you happy. My God, what else could this man do? He cooks, he cleans, he picks up the kids, he takes them to school, he allows her to have her life, right? He allows her to make money. He allows her to go out and do whatever she wants. She's at the lab all the time, and this just, it like almost makes her hate him more. That he's a nice guy. I don't get it. Larissa files for divorce in 2002. So, but one thing is, never confuse kindness for weakness, people. Just because this man was kind and through their entire marriage treated her like a princess, she thought that that's how he was going to be through the divorce. No way, buddy. He was like, no, you're not going to treat me like this for almost 20 years. Or for 20 years. And then divorce me. And put me, literally, she got the kids. She got the house. She sticks him in a condo. And on top of this, apparently they found out that he had lost his job. This is getting, when he went, I'm sure he was very depressed. He had lost his whole family. He lost his job. He was really kind of depressed a little bit because of everything that was happening. I mean, can you blame the guy? He's tried for 20 years and all of his wife has done is basically berate him and treat him like crap. He wasn't gonna let her do that because she wasn't basically his wife anymore, right? She wanted to have her house. That's what she said. Her house. 20 years together. They bought it together. They moved together. He moved for her. He didn't remember from earlier. He did not want to move out to there. He moved for her. But when her attorney told her that, guess what? You're gonna have to give him half your assets, probably spousal support because he's been taking care of your kids, and half your property, the earnings. She freaked out. She's like, he's not getting half of my house. How can he get half of my house? Half of my house. I'm pretty sure it was his house too. I think this lady's lost her. She's so, everything is Larissa's. It's mine. It's my daughter. I'm gonna do what I want with her. It's my son. It's my husband. Mine. That's she doesn't have her kids anymore, basically. I mean, even her son's living with her, but she doesn't have her daughter. Because once her daughter was kicked out and moved to her grandparents, she basically was like, you're not my mom anymore. And you'll see what she says to her in court. I'll read verbatim what she says. Now, she only has her things, her material things. And she is that furious, so what does she do? Well, of course, what does every person do? They go and they enlist, because she knew she couldn't murder him himself, she enlists some muscle to help her. Because that's what we all do, right? We go kill our spouses that, I don't know why people kill their spouses, because A, you're the first person they're gonna look at. I don't care even if you didn't do it. So, that's how I hate to use narcissistic, but she was so Larissa, okay? She was all about, she lived in this bubble, Larissa bubble, and she just thought that she was gonna hire some muscle because she knew she couldn't murder him himself. She had this plan, and so this lab tech who's 21 years old, and I'm not sure how to pronounce his name, so if I do say it wrong, I do apologize. I'll call him James. I think it's James Vaughan, but I'm not sure. So I'm just gonna call him James. So James, who works with her, and she sees him and she's like, 21, manipulatable, let's see, I'm gonna pick him. So she starts in on him when seducing him, and kind of suggesting here and there about how her husband is very abusive. And then he gets more abusive, and he gets more angry, and she's really, really just working this guy, right? And he's starting to believe her, and he feels bad for her, right? I mean, he's doing everything she says. And of course, we know she always tells the truth, maybe in her eyes, because, it is all about Larissa. But basically, by the time she got out of her attorney's office, and her attorney said to her, look, you're gonna have to pay him, as he said exactly, well, she'd lose half of her property, and you'd have to pay her husband's support. She basically walked out the attorney's office saying, I'm gonna kill him. That is actually the most logical answer, right? I mean, let's kill the guy. I mean, he's been great for 20 years. He doesn't deserve any of that. He deserves death, right? Come on, ladies, right? I hope you do know I'm kidding, right? I think it's the red hair. I feel kind of sassy with it. Anyway, I'm being sarcastic on a very serious subject because I am trying to think through her eyes, like, why would anybody have sane even think that murdering somebody after walking there, not even thinking about, okay, well, let's negotiate this, let's see what he says. Maybe he doesn't want support. She's controlled him all of these years. Maybe she could get him to give her the house, and maybe she could just pay him support. I don't know. She never asked him. She didn't give him that chance or opportunity. She just decided to kill him. That's what she said. Planned to murder him. And then I'm sorry that I am being sarcastic, but I do find this to be very upsetting, which is probably why I'm using sarcasm as a way to kind of hyper state this absolute absurdity from this woman. Okay, so she was no, as they say right here, criminal sophistication was not her strong suit. Just like I said, just because you have an IQ does not mean you're going to be a criminal mastermind. Let's Let's just say that. Okay. But she did know her limitations, so that's good. She did know she did have some faults, right? So she couldn't murder somebody by herself. This poor guy. So she started, like I said, working on him. And obviously Tim knew that the situation was really getting out of control because they broke into his apartment where he's living, this condo, to steal some paperwork. And Tim had bought himself a gun. Now this is a man that put up with her for so many years and is now he's afraid for his life apparently. So she must have been getting off those vibes. She even went to her nail salon, and which was normal. She got her nails done every week, but her nail tech said that, at one point she did say, okay, I'm gonna quote this because this is interesting. As she's getting her nails done, she says, quote, "You don't understand," unquote, said Larissa, referring to the murder of her husband. Quote, "I could do it and get away with it," unquote. Okay. So obviously the manicurist is like, whatever, lady, I hear this all the time. Everybody says they want to kill somebody when they're pissed at them, right? But nobody goes through with it, or the majority of people do not go through with it. Plan into action are a little bit vague because she never ever gives a statement on what happened. So this is what, based upon James's reports, happened. They needed to get him out of the house, right? So they drive to Tim's home, and he's there, and she, of course, is Tyler. Or she's, Tyler's not with her at the time, but she, has custody of Tyler, so she's saying, Tim, I need you to come out here. Something's really wrong with Tyler. So, of course, he's like, oh my God, what's wrong with my son? He throws on a robe, he comes inside, and he's immediately ambushed by her muscle, James. And she jumps on him, jumps on his legs to subdue him. And then they have this ball of chloroform soaked rag, and they stuff it in his mouth, and they put a bag over his head. What? How about negotiations? like I said, there was no mention of any negotiations between this couple. She just heard that she was gonna have to do all this, have her house, and she was out of her mind, pissed. So the investigators don't believe, and this is the saddest part, that he was actually dead by the time they got to her house. And waiting for Tim was a 5-gallon drum, which was going to be his burial site until they actually buried him or figured out what to do with him. So they put him head first. She commands her muscle James to please put him head first into this barrel. And she starts pouring acid over his head. He wasn't already dead, like the investigator thinks he wasn't. This is a very, think about it, painful death, and I'm just gonna put a warning out there before we go any further. Skip ahead. They pour acid over his head, and this is gonna start to eat through his skin, and then it's gonna go into his brain and go. It is a painful death. Not that I would know, and I've never done it, but I'm just saying it's very painful. So they pour this acid over him, but they can only get it so far because they didn't bring, I guess, enough. And then his feet wouldn't fit into also what they did, they sawed off his feet. God, let's hope this poor guy is dead. And they sealed the barrel, they throw it in the back of her car, and they head to her office, and they put him in the lab. Because that's where you always put your dead husband's body, right? She thinks that, I guess, her husband doesn't have any friends or isn't going to be missed because she puts him in the workplace, in her place of work, in a 5-gallon barrel drum. And, of course, his friends start to wonder what in the world's wrong with him. See, he just lost his job, and he, is getting this divorce, and he's very depressed that they are worried about him. So they call the Fresno Police Department, and immediately the police say, look, man, I'm sure your buddy is like with hanging out, he's fine, whatever. And the next time they report him, this is like 3 or 4 days, nobody's heard from him, nobody can get a hold of him. And they're really, really concerned, as I would be too, because this guy is very responsible. I mean, the whole story's been there, and his friends, I'm sure he's the same way with his friends. I'm sure he has lots of friends. So here is these people that are out looking for their friend at bars and clubs, and they can't find him. He doesn't answer his cell phone, and then the police tell them that he probably was so depressed because of everything that was happening that he actually went out to the desert and shot himself in the head or committed suicide. They're like, no, you would not do that. You're not listening. So luckily, luckily he had friends, and then his family started to call because his friends called his family, and he's like, look, you've got to look into this further. This is not the family. No, look, he didn't kill himself. He's gone. Something happened to him. Either he's in a wreck somewhere or something is wrong. So they start to dig and dig, and they find out about his marital problems, and they're like, okay, now we got something. And for the police, his friends were pushing and pushing for the police to, please investigate their friend's death even further. The thing that really gave Larissa away, she was more concerned about them getting a warrant for her house and for her work than she was about her missing husband. That was her friends. Her friends are like, what? Do you care what happened to me? She's like, yeah. But I'm really concerned about the finding, getting a warrant for my work and my house. That is weird. Okay, this lady is definitely not a criminal mastermind. Because that's, you're basically saying, oh my God, there's evidence there. Yeah, but your dead husband's body in a 5-gallon barrel. That would give it away. Then she asks a friend to rent a moving van for no reason, not to move her, but obviously she wanted to get the body out of her workplace, her place of work. Yeah, that looks suspicious. Yeah, that right there. The investigators were shocked when they heard of the litany of voice messages that Larissa left on Tim's answering machine. I'm just gonna read this straight off of my notes, because there's so many that betrayed Larissa's hostility towards her husband. She was also the last person to call Tim before he went missing. None of the information was enough to get a warrant. The rest, the investigators were not even sure a crime was committed, but enough for the Fresno County detectives to get a warrant to look around at her cell phone records. And guess what's gonna happen? They're gonna see all of these calls to Mr. James, right? Her muscle. Now they're doing a background check on James, and he has nothing on his background. I mean, not even his speeding ticket. Okay, so this can mean one of two things. It can mean that he is either super innocent and has no clue, she just is using his number, or calling him. She did work with him. Maybe she had him doing a lot of things for her. She was a little bit demanding, to say the least. But Larissa's psychotic brain here. If I really didn't want to get caught, I would make sure I was there. I'd want to make sure that I didn't look suspicious and leave town on vacation, or that James may say something that would blurt everything out, which is exactly what happened. By the time Larissa was off the plane and heading up out of, from vacation, she was arrested because James, third interrogation, he told him everything. And he was immediately arrested, and Larissa then was arrested. Now here was the thing, is that they wanted to split up the trials. They wanted to do James separately and then Larissa separately, which the judge agreed. And then the defense said, well, we can't really have the trial here in Fresno or anywhere near Fresno because there's going to be bias against her because this is where it happened and everybody knows the story, right? So the judge agreed and she was moved to LA. Her trial was in LA. Now, because they both had attorneys, right? This took them 3 years to actually go to court for this. And during the trial, James went first. He was convicted of first-degree murder and sentenced to life without parole. I don't think he would have killed anybody if it weren't for Larissa's way about her, and her, convincing him that Tim was a threat and all of this stuff. I think, but it was his statement to the cops that it was a problem because, and the fact that the investigators then said that they didn't think that he was dead when they poured the acid over him. Gosh, that just breaks my heart. It really does. Anyway, seriously, that makes me feel sick to my stomach because, I want to cry. I can't imagine the pain of acid going through my head and into my brain and killing me. Oh my god. Because, see, and the reason why they didn't think he was dead was because their houses were so close together that even if he was suffocating, he was, sorry, I talk with my hands, he was probably still alive because it was such a short distance before they put him in the barrel and started dumping this acid on 2006, November 2006. And he said, quote, I held the barrel for her. I put him in, poured all the solution, and she couldn't stand it, unquote, said James during the confession. Quote, so she said, put it on, the lid on. So I helped her put the lid on, and she put it in the shed, unquote. So basically he's saying she did nothing, just instructed him, and he did everything. So that really sealed his fate. James could not testify against her because he was already convicted and, there's nothing they could offer him to entice him to, proudly and said, quote, "Maybe later in life I can learn to forgive you, but I doubt it," unquote. And she's in tears at this point, thinking about what her mother had done to her father and how she treated her and sent her away because she was too much trouble. I mean, her daughter's been basically emotionally abused by this woman for a long time. With tears coming down her face, she says, quote, "This is goodbye, not just for now, but forever. This is goodbye as your daughter," unquote. And with that, Larissa was transferred to the tough women's prison in Chowchilla, California. I think that's how you say it, Chowchilla. Who knows? With her intelligence and ability to manipulate, Larissa Schuster may now be in charge of her cell block. But that's all she will be in charge of, I'll tell you that. Have a wonderful day, wonderful evening, wonderful